Hola, buenos días, buenos días. I'm so glad to be here with you in Santiago at this wonderful Congress, and I'm going to start with a question for you all. I'm interested, if you will, could you raise your hand if you had good sleep last night? Did you sleep well last night? Many of you, yes. Not everyone, not me actually. But a big question for neuroscience is, what does it truly mean to sleep well? It's great to feel refreshed when you wake up, but that's not all there is to it. You've probably heard many times it's good to sleep for 7 hours or 8 hours, depending on your age. Well, I'd say specifying a firm number of hours is a little misleading. People don't all need the same amount of sleep. What matters isn't exactly how long, but it matters more what your brain is doing during that time. So my message for you today is that through the neuroscience of sleep, we're learning steadily more about what happens in the brain and about the many benefits of high-quality sleep. And furthermore, based on that research, we can find new ways to help people improve their sleep. Now, as you know, a big fraction of everyone's life is spent sleeping. And you've also been told that you need to sleep for health. It's really the top three: nutrition, exercise, and good sleep. So we all know sleep is important, but how many of you are still not getting good sleep every night? Many of you, yes. What a pity. There can be many reasons for that, though. Like maybe there just aren't enough hours in the day, and there's so many things you want to do, so you sacrifice sleep. But that's a problem for society because poor sleep, insufficient sleep can be a risk factor for many diseases and also a risk factor for traffic accidents. So we have to take care for that. Now, some of you maybe are really lucky and you get perfect sleep. And you lay down in bed, you rest your head on the pillow, and the next thing you know, you're awake and you feel great after a good night of sleep. But that actually happened to me when I flew here to Chile. In the airplane, I fell asleep, and it seemed like my brain was just off the whole time. I just woke up, and there I was, just about to land. In fact, neuroscience tells us that the brain is not off. The brain is working busily all throughout the time we're sleeping, and that work is very important. Now, we have to think more about what is happening. So a question is, what's the brain doing all that time? And how come we don't know about it? Well, one of the reasons we don't know about it is something called sleep amnesia. And I've studied amnesia of various sorts, but sleep amnesia really applies to all of us, and it means that while we're asleep, the brain is in a very different mode. And it's in a different mode that is not conducive to storing new memories. It's working on old memories instead. And so with this different mode of sleep, you are having your brain be busy doing all those other memory processing, but not really processing the information that is important, that's happening at the time. Oh, here's an example. You have many dreams during the night. Everybody has lots and lots of dreams, but we remember very few of them. And also, everybody has this thing called a microarousal. You wake up just for a moment, and then you fall back asleep quickly. And this happens maybe many times during the night. We're not aware of it. We're oblivious to that. So the brain is really not encoding new memories. What it's doing is working with these old memories. Okay, so the brain is not off. It's doing many things. There are many benefits to sleep. And actually, you have all these moving cameras around here in the audience. You should take one of the cameras now and focus over here and see if you find somebody who looks like they're just about to fall asleep, because I'm going to talk about sleepiness. So if you get good sleep, then one of the benefits, well, the most obvious benefit is then you're less sleepy. So you're going to be less sleepy if you've got good sleep. That's just so obvious, of course. But there are other benefits as well. There are benefits for physical health, and I haven't listed them all, but there are many things. There's some new evidence that suggests maybe during sleep you get rid of amyloid from your brain, and this is going to make your brain work better and maybe not have Alzheimer's disease. There are also benefits of sleep for cardiovascular function and your immune system as well. It has to learn about new microbes that have been discovered in the body and attack them, and that part of that happens during sleep. So we need all this good sleep for the health reasons, but I'm going to focus in my talk now mostly on the cognitive benefits. What do we get from sleep cognitively? And there are benefits for memory, for creativity, and for well-being. And of course, you know, dreaming is when we're really incredibly creative. Like some of you might think you're not very creative, but that's wrong. All of us can make amazing stories in our dreams, but we just don't tend to remember them. So part of your creativity is accessing all that creativity that you have. So let me make one more point first about this. First benefit, less sleepiness. Now, if you don't sleep enough, you might say, well, I'm not sleeping enough, but that's okay because my sleepiness goes away when I drink coffee, and I have my coffee every day, no problem with sleepiness. And so I'd say, well, coffee is great, enjoy your coffee, but just because you're getting rid of the sleepiness problem, you may not be getting all these other benefits if you're not getting good sleep. And of course, it means what kind of sleep are you getting to allow us to get all these other benefits. Let's go into the memory benefits first. That's the one I've been working on in my lab the most. Of course, you have to be alert to help with learning, but this is something different. The idea here is that sleep supports learning. You learn things when you're awake, but then the process continues in the brain. Now, until a few years ago, the evidence for that wasn't convincing. It was still a controversial point. So in my lab, we developed an unusual tactic. We went against the usual orthodox view, and that's always fun to do. We went against the orthodox view in sleep research that sounds are blocked out, and they don't get to you unless they're loud enough. They don't get up to the cerebral cortex where we make sense of them, so they're just blocked. And we just ignored that orthodox view. In our experiments, we presented soft sounds to people during sleep. And the people, first they came into the lab in our experiments, and they learned something new. They learned to play a melody on a keyboard. They might see some people and learn everyone's name. They might learn locations of objects. And each time when they learned something, there was always some sound associated with it, like some spoken names or some other sounds. And that was important for our experiment. After the learning, then people went to sleep in the lab, and we monitored their brain activity with all the standard measures of sleep physiology. And we determined when they entered the special slow wave sleep stage, the deep sleep stage that has these characteristic electrical signals of slow waves. And that's an important time for memory processing. And so at that time, we played some of the sounds from learning. We selected just which ones to play. We played them very softly to not disturb sleep. They were barely audible. And then people woke up later, and what did we find? As expected, in experiment after experiment, these soft sounds brought to mind what people had learned before sleep, even though people won't woken up. But when they did wake up, they didn't know that they had heard sounds, but they woke up better to recall the memories that we chose to reactivate for them. So we showed that we could have a target of which memories to reactivate, and we call this method targeted memory reactivation, or TMR. And we use TMR as a research tool to study what happens in the brain when we reactivate memories during sleep, which we do under normal sleep conditions as well. But now we're exploring some applications of that too. We're using TMR in the home. We're developing some wearable technology that can allow us to use that method to perhaps help people recover from stroke quicker or improve their memory. And it's a little tricky because if the sounds are too loud, if they even slightly disturb sleep, then they can make memory worse, not better. So we've had to work out some ways to carefully, automatically, and for each person, adjust the sound level for each individual to make it work at home. So that means be careful if you decide you want to try this on your own at home. That could be dangerous if you're playing the sounds too loud. And it's also probably not a good idea to have the TV on all night while you're sleeping, because some of that advertising might get in without you noticing it and interfere with what you really want to do. So be careful with that. Now, when we reactivate memories using sounds in the lab, and when they're naturally reactivated during everyday sleep, they produce some signals. And what's happening is there's certain brain areas involved in memory processing, the hippocampus, the cerebral cortex, and the thalamus. And there's specific electrical signals shown here. These brain rhythms can be well coordinated, and when that happens, memory storage is improved. And these brain rhythms are even more prominent in people that have really excellent memory, super memory. And so what we think is that when these electrical signals are observed during sleep, that's when memories are reactivated, and then they become stronger as a result of that. So what is it really? It's like your brain is being cleaned up by house elves. House elves are organizing your memory. You may think that's silly. That's actually a title of a paper I wrote, and it's in a free science education journal. You can find it easily by Googling house elves and sleep if you're interested in this. And it summarizes in an accessible way for kids what's happening during sleep. But if you don't like that metaphor, let's just say neurons in the brain are doing this restructuring of all your memories. They're doing memory reorganizing. And that's an important thing. You can think about it as, well, we don't learn everything instantaneously. It takes some work. Like, think about a skill. If you learn a skill, you've got to practice it to get good. Well, actually, practice is needed for everything we learn, the facts we learn, the episodes that we learn about. So this practice happens in two ways. One is you can intentionally try to rehearse information, and you would do that when you meet a new person. You try to learn their name, and you might recall it again and again, so you're good at remembering it. But a second type of rehearsal or practice is happening unconsciously. And this is what we think is happening during sleep. It happens without us knowing it. So that's an important aspect of how memory works. We have to learn something and then have it stored effectively so it's later when they're available later when we need it. Now, this organizing memories together, it weaves them together because you have to take this new information and not just strengthen it, but connect it to other information you know. That's part of storing memories well. It has to be integrated with that information. And when you do that, this is also a driver of creative problem solving. When you bring divergent memories together, you can come up with a new idea. When you have a problem to solve or a tough decision to make, in English we would say you should sleep on it. The right answer is more likely to come to you the next day. And there's actually some solid evidence for that. For example, our experiments with soft sounds showed that we can reactivate specific problems that were unsolved before sleep, little puzzles, say. And when people woke up, they were more likely to get the solution to those problems if we had reactivated during sleep. So it would be great in the future if we could focus people on solving problems during their sleep, like climate change and other problems in the world, by using this creativity of the sleeping mind. Now, next, sleep is also linked to psychological well-being. And you can think of it this memory. What memories every night do you reactivate while you're sleeping? Who's choosing which memories? Well, ideally, it's the things you want to remember, the things you're going to need to know later. But what if instead your brain has this bad habit of reactivating depressing or anxious thoughts you had that day? Now, that could be a problem that feeds back with bad consequences for you. And so this loop is probably operative in people who have uninvited anxious thoughts pervading their waking hours. And maybe it works that way really in all of us unconsciously, or in a lot of us. So we're working on ways in our laboratories to find new ways to try to interrupt this kind of negative loop during sleep and to make it easier for people to cope with negative memories. That's one thing that we think sleep is also good for. Helping learning happen and then integrating the information and dealing with the negative aspects of some memories. So what I'm talking about here, it's mostly unconscious memory processing, but of course, we also have conscious experiences during sleep. We have dreams, and they're made up of pieces of memories, sometimes put together in crazy ways, and yet we usually accept them as real experiences while they're happening, and only when we wake up do we realize we've been dreaming. Now, in my lab, we use sounds during sleep to influence dreaming as well, with the same kind of method, targeted memory reactivation, but now focused on dreaming. This is a picture from a children's book, and it's about a giant who goes around uninvited and blows in dreams to little children unsuspectedly, good dreams or bad dreams. And these dreams are given to the children without their permission. So we don't do that. We get permission from people first, and then we present soft sounds to help people revisit parts of an experience they'd had before sleep, such as in one experiment, we had a very profound virtual reality experience that people had while they were awake, and then we helped them get back to that, little pieces of that, while they were having a dream. And we can also increase the chances that you solve a problem, as I was mentioning. And thirdly, we can increase the chances that you recognize the dream as a dream. And you can do that while you're still sleeping. This is called lucid dreaming, knowing you're dreaming while you're dreaming before you wake up. So training in lucid dreaming in this way is something we've used, and we found it can help nightmare sufferers. And in another study, we showed that we can converse with dreamers. It's not a normal conversation because dreamers can't control most of their body. There's muscle atonia during REM preventing you from talking, but the dreamers can communicate with us in other ways. They can move their eyes, and they can control their breathing with sniffs like and we can record that with our measurements, or with the eye movements, as you see here in red, the eyes are moving left and right, and they're signaling the answer to the question. So we asked the question, they knew they were going to get questions, but they didn't know which math question they would get, and then they moved their eyes quickly left and right to give us the answer, and that demonstrated that this communication really happens. They're hearing correctly what we say and can answer the question. And so now we're moving on to other questions about their dreams, things we don't know, and we can use this communication during sleep as a new era in dream research, using this strategy to get real-time information and allowing us to look at the brain activity during dreaming and knowing what they're dreaming about at that moment. And so we can study lucid dreamers who can have some control over their dreams, and they can pursue various goals. They can try to solve a problem, they can work on perfecting a skill, and so there's good evidence that that can be done. But here's a crazy idea for the future, talking about the future. What if we could show that in a lucid dream, you could willfully control and direct your immune system, or if you could, with your dreaming mind, gain some control over body functions that we normally think are out of our volitional control? Well, I don't know if that's going to happen, but we're steadily adding to the neuroscience of dreaming, the literature, and making good progress, trying to understand what are dreams for, what do we get out of dreams anyway, and does it connect with the story I've been telling about memory processing happening during sleep? So that literature is getting more interesting, but there's an older literature on using dreams. In the Tibetan Buddhist contemplative tradition, there's a practice known as dream yoga, and it's used to simulate alternative realities and gain some deep insight that way. And for many years, my wife and I have been volunteering to teach neuroscience in monasteries in India. And some of the monks and nuns there have been learning. For many years, they now have expertise both in Tibetan Buddhist philosophy and contemporary neuroscience, which is great because now it allows us to collaborate together with them in research on topics like this, these advanced contemplative practices. And in fact, right here on Friday morning at 10 o'clock, there'll be another speaker talking more about exciting Buddhist neuroscience connections, Marcia Grabowecki, who is my wife. She'll be here. So she'll talk more about that. So let me get back to my topic. The research on sleep and dreaming from labs around the world is helping us understand the sleeping brain. And this is leading to new ideas for helping people with their sleep. So in the future, well, there will not be a magic pill you can take to get optimal sleep. Yet, you can take steps before sleep to improve the chances of getting good sleep. And I'll just tell you a little bit about that. The starting point is sleep hygiene. And its advice you can find easily on the internet. So I won't go through the points here, but this is a good website. And there are many websites that can tell you these are ideas that are well agreed upon in the sleep community. Things like sleeping at the same time period every night, avoiding alcohol and caffeine, various things you should look into that could help you get better sleep. But in addition to sleep hygiene, we also now have sleep engineering. And this involves wearable technology that measures from the head or the wrist or the ear or the finger, and we're working on developing strategies to enhance sleep by making small adjustments to what the brain does during sleep, such as stimulation to enhance slow waves or to progress better through the various sleep stages. And hopefully these methods will become more available, but there's certainly dangers. I mean, you shouldn't necessarily use these devices if you're anxious about your sleep already. It might just make you more anxious. So it may not be good for everyone. And I have to admit that the advertising from companies sometimes is exaggerated. So what we really need is not just anecdotal evidence where someone says this works for me, but we need evidence from solid studies with rigorous methods, and that's going to tell us what will really work with these technologies. So it's really important that governments and other agencies around the world are funding research to give to society this valuable knowledge. Now, I'm optimistic about the future of sleep, even though we're at an early stage of acquiring the evidence we need to enhance sleep using this technology. And of course, the new methods will have to work together with sleep hygiene. We all need to be thoughtful about the ethical dimensions, as in the steps taken in neuro rights here by the Chilean government, for example. And I'll close with something that's available even if we don't have the technology yet, because while we're waiting for the technology to be fully tested, here's something you could do now. Take the last 10 minutes before you shut your eyes to go to sleep. And you can take that time to put some strong mental effort into placing your mind into a very calm and relaxed state and form a strong intention for your mind to return to that state again during sleep. You know, because we're enslaved in a way by our habits, both in wake and in sleep. But with effort, you can gradually adjust those habits. So just before sleep, take a few minutes to try to cultivate the qualities you'd like to enhance. For example, you can work on feeling calmer and more content. A good strategy is to think about habitually being more kind and helpful and tuned into other people with compassion and gratitude. And what you're doing now is creating some memories of a calm and relaxed or pro-social mindset. And then those could be the memories that get reactivated, that your brain brings back while you're sleeping and then strengthens them while you're sleeping. So take the cycle I talked about with depressive thoughts during wake and during sleep. And we can now take steps to maybe shift that to better thoughts, happy, compassionate, or calm thoughts, for example. So it's sort of an extension of the sleep hygiene idea, a calming pre-sleep routine that, along with a strong intention, that can pervade your sleep time too when those memories can get reactivated. So it does work to shift your habitual ways of thinking more in the directions you prefer them to go. It takes a lot of work, but my hope is that we can also shift the habitual ways that our minds work while we're asleep, and that these efforts could pay off because the habits influence a lot of our decisions and actions. So what if, with optimal sleep, you could wake up each day happier and more ready to contribute positively to the world because you do have that power to cultivate better wake and sleep mental habits. Thank you.